But next question, over here.
Hello. Yeah. I'm not trying to turn this into a feminist movement or anything, but
Okay.
do you think when it comes to positive social change, that if you look over years, quite a lot of women have been kind of phased out. I mean, if you look at quite a lot of the capitalism companies, it's quite male dominated, I think. Do you think that plays a role in the breakdown of the social structure? Because if you, go on.
Well, I would say that the inequalities that have been constantly perpetuated by unfortunately white men for so long, they only serve to help a direction that can make for a more egalitarian society. I think, the issue of rights of any culture, regardless of race or creed, comes into play. And I think the best way to do it, no pun intended, is to capitalize on that imposed indifference. Because once people understand a new direction, once a feminist organization or a race rights organization establishes new direction, understands a new direction, and move forward towards, as opposed to just trying to fight the system, which is what everyone tends to do right now, is every single round, whether you're an environmentalist organization, you keep fighting the system. Greenpeace pulls up in front of those massive tankers and tries to stop them from their illegal fishing, which is great. We have to keep doing stuff like that. But Greenpeace is doing nothing about the social system that's motivating those boats to do what they're doing. And that's really what it comes down to. So to answer your question, I think any and all groups that have been deprived in this system will serve, hopefully, serve as an incorporation to the larger body of the Zeitgeist movement, because these are the people, and amazingly enough, not surprisingly actually, everyone is almost in that position. I mean, the wealth distribution is so massive, the wealth stratification is so massive on this planet. I'm so surprised that more people haven't moved forward with something like this, because it's really the people that are screwed. The people meaning those that are not in the highest forms of the corporate and business elite.
Yeah, but that's what I find breakdown in family. Do you think that's got a lot to do with it?
I think if people realized what the family could be. I mean, back in, at least 40, 50 years ago, you had one parent that could create the child. The mother would stay home with the child. That was a very positive thing. Now both parents have to constantly work. I haven't met one family where there's somebody that can stay home with the child and cultivate them. And as I denoted, childhood is extremely relevant to our survival. If you are deprived as a small child, you have a very high propensity of physical disease for the rest of your life.
That's the thing. You look at a lot of the social problems that we have all over the world. You just look around some places in London, a lot of people that are involved with knife crime and things like that, and theft and everything. If you look at their social background, their upbringing, they're usually brought up by, a single mother. And I just think sometimes if you look in society, a lot of the businesses, a lot of these, I'm not making it into a man-woman thing, but, a lot of these CEOs and everything, they spend a lot of time away from their families. They become detached from what I think children really need.
Even beyond families and what you point out, the cultivation, of course, of children at a very young age is extremely... I think there should be... It sounds very extreme, but because of what we understand about childhood at a very young age, there should literally be a small manual that's given to parents, because parents don't know how to raise their kids. Most of them don't. They should think about it scientifically. And that's another sad thing of our culture, especially in the religious realm. There's this belligerent childbearing thing that goes on where it's always like this empirical right of having tons and tons of kids, not realizing what you're creating. Why are you having kids? And I think Jacques Fresco had made a great point. Why do you have kids? What's the reasoning for it? It's to make them better, smarter than you are. It's to actually make something, as opposed to just letting the kid be raised and projecting all of your insecurities on it and all the sick things that happen in the world today. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. I'm trying to go where the microphone is. So over here, okay. But raise your hand for her.
Right. I hope this isn't misconstrued as some sort of anti-zeitgeist point. It's more a point of clarification for myself.
Please.
Now, as far as I understand it, the Venus Project relies to a degree on technology to work, to have an egalitarian society. the ideas of the sort of monorail system that's based on a magnetised
Maglev.
technology and all that sort of thing, to reduce pollution and keep everything relatively equal because there's no massive energy input. Now, my point would be is to reach that point of technology, we need people to invent it. Now, we could say that we're at that point now, but to get to this point, people like Einstein have come up with their theories of everything relativity. You've got the Wright brothers with flight. Now, they didn't make any profit from that, but in their minds, their profit was the fact that they achieved something that nobody else has, and they are still known now, so many years later, for that great achievement. Even though we've landed on the moon, everybody still remembers the Wright brothers for essentially inventing flight. Now, if we remove a form of that incentive, because at the end of the day it is an incentive for those people, if we remove that and we remain at the level of hunter-gatherers, as we find if we go into the African jungles, we find there are still tribes that work in that way. They don't have any reason to extend their being, their technology to these heights. Isn't there a level of paradoxy here between a hunter-gatherer society of equality and no need for extended technology and the Venus Project?
That's a terrific point. I think what it comes down to is that because the world population is what it is, and because the complexity of society has been created in the way that it has, I don't think without the use of technology the world's population could sustain itself. I think we've reached the point, and frankly, I don't think the establishment that exists now is going to be able to sustain the world population based on the growth rates that are existing. You have to have a dramatic technological shift to create and produce abundance, or whatever that abundance is an empty word, the word enough for everyone. You have to do that. So that's the reality that makes us different. And I think it's also the fact that there's certain conveniences. Materialism is kind of what you're describing. The hunter and gatherers were not materialistic. They didn't know what that was. They had utilitarian notions. I imagine, I've never met a hunter and gatherer society, but from what I've come to understand, they had a simplistic nomadic world. They didn't have property. They weren't really nomadic, but I don't want to get into our anthropological debates here. But basically they had a quality where they moved around very often at times, which is amazing because if our society of the Venus Project, and this is a subtle aside, the Venus Project was able to come to fruition, the resource-based economy, the interests would deviate so far from our current lifestyle of sitting in one home and going to one job, driving back and forth all week, and then keeping all your property under one little roof. You'd want to have no property. I don't want to own anything. Whenever I travel, I want it to be light. I want to be able to hop in some form of commute and go somewhere with very little resources and then get my access to everything there. And that's the beauty of this when people talk about materialism. Materialism is a very sick creation in our system to hoard things and want property. Because there's a great sermon of a man that I appreciate his angle. I ignore all the religious stuff because it's all about psychology. And he talks about this relationship where his grandmother would taught him to play Monopoly and she'd always beat him. And then one day he beat her really badly and that wasn't relevant, but he beat her and he was really proud of himself and he was like 9 or 10 years old. And his grandmother took all the pieces and said, well, it all goes back in the box. All those cars, all those trains, all those clothes, all those banks, it all goes back, all that money goes back in the box. It was never yours to begin with, and it'll be here long after you're gone. And that is a very important way to think about things. How much is enough? And that's a sickness of our culture. How much is enough? There's never enough. And the thing is our psychology is wrong. So that's the defining aspect. So in 2 points to answer your question, we have to have technology to run society today. Our population is too large, and the benefits of that really help us grow and nurture new creative expressions. It's about making a life, not a living. And I think we can have extraneous and non-utilitarian based things, but they come out of a specific context. It's not all just people hanging out doing nothing. People will have lots of free time, and they'll contribute, and they'll help their own development and understanding who they are. Anyway, I don't want to go on a long tangent. So that's the first attribute. The technology serves so many different functions beyond just minimalism. But then the materialism aspect, how much is enough? What if I get emails from people, they say, well, in your society, what if I want to have a 100-acre farm? You can't give everyone on the planet a 100-acre farm. That's their rationale for denying the system. The idea that if everyone can't have everything, then it can't work, as though everyone wanting a 100-acre farm is the ideal for every human being. As though People care about having a gold-plated toilet, as though John Travolta needs 2 jumbo jets in his front lawn. This is the kind of stuff that we get away from, and I think people will start to respect their time. They'll start to respect their freedom of movement, and growing in a way that has nothing to do with property at all. There'll be an abundance of property in a utilitarian-based sense, and I think there'll be lots of artistic creations as well. But I think the culture shift will be dramatic when people come back to this hunter-gatherer notion of a minimalist abundance in a high-tech society. I think that's a good way to put it.